All right, folks, from the land of the midnight sun right here in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, all the way over to my next guest, the one and only legendary Lawrence Gowan, who's a man who goes by many names, apparently. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing very well, and the names are still trailing me everywhere I go. But wow, you're I think this might be my first interview ever in Yellowknife.
Well, there you go, man. I mean, it's interesting in this day and age, the wonders of the internet have sort of blown the doors wide open to, at least with independent radio, because, I mean, I don't even
Yeah.
air locally. I air all the way over in Montreal mainly.
Well, that's yeah, that is fantastic. One of the great features of the digital age is exactly that. It's funny because I remember you just triggered my memory. Maybe about 20 years ago, I met a whole troop of people that were traveling from Yellowknife for a sporting event and in an airport.
Uh-huh.
And I remember at the time it kind of blew me away that they came up, they knew the songs, and we started gabbing away. But that was due to a thing we have in Canada called the CBC, and I realized it was Good Rockin' Tonight was their connection
Yeah.
to rock music. But now you can be as connected in Yellowknife as you are to anything going on as you would be in New York City, which is where I'm calling you from. So
Oh, wow.
that's great.
Well,
Yeah.
what I was thinking before you called is, for a kid that grew up on much music and shows like Good Rockin' Tonight in the 80s, I mean, you're a household name, based on the virtual fact that you put out one of, the coolest music videos that was out there. And I'm sure there was some sort of CanCon rules, I think, too, in those days for music videos, and I believe there still is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you were really in heavy rotation, which was awesome.
Well, yes, it was a great way to quickly connect with people and have them see your music. I mean, that was the great feature of the '80s is that television provided all bands with basically the same stage on which to perform media television, and yeah, it connected with people in a very immediate and in some cases a very profound way.
Now, I mean, just for the sake of the listeners, I mean, obviously, I don't want to dwell on a 30-year-old hit, but Lawrence is the composer of one of the truly great landmark songs of the '80s, "Criminal Mind." But of course, now you're in Styx, and it's funny, probably on based on that song, from way back when. People almost still don't equate you with the band, despite the fact that you're going on 19 years with them.
Correct. It's funny. It is when people get you kind of lost in their mind as to what era you're from and what where you are in their files. It's amazing how hard it is to break them of that, or unless they are following your every move
Yeah.
along the way. And but yes, it does surprise me sometimes, particularly when I'm in Canada. It's different in the States, but in Canada, where people will say, "Gowan, are you still performing?" And I say, "Yes, I am." For nearly 2 decades now, I've been the lead singer of a band called Styx, and there's lots and lots of ways of referencing that, but I still do perform as Gowan as well. The only thing is I only have time to do maybe about 8 or 9 shows
Yeah.
per year as compared to 120 usually with Styx.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now you've been with Styx, as we mentioned, for like going on 19 years. There was that
Yeah.
fateful, night in Branson, Missouri, of all places, where you kicked off your career with the band.
Yeah. It's funny. It started, my connection with Styx started in Montreal in 1997. Remember the new Montreal Forum was built,
Mm-hmm.
and it opened that year. And one of the first shows in there was Styx, and the promoter, Donald K. Donald, a very well known Quebec promoter for several decades. He had a Gowan show booked the same night in Montreal at a place called the Theatre Saint Laurent. About 3 weeks before the show, he called and said, "I want you to do this show with Styx at the New Montreal Forum,"
Wow.
opening for them. And part of it, my immediate reaction was I hadn't opened for anyone in Canada in like 14 years, and I thought, on the one hand, I thought it was an odd request, and he said, "Well, look, you played the old Montreal Forum. This might be your only chance to play the new one. You never know." So I figured, I really want to see the place, and I'd never seen Styx live, so did that show. They became very aware of of myself and heard the audience singing all these songs, and so 2 years later, when they needed a new piano player singer and a guy that could fit into the band, they thought of me.
So over the years, like, what do you feel you personally bring to Styx?
That's something that's very subjective as far as the audience goes. I prefer to hear people, cast that analogy themselves. But I think what happened, from my little camera angle, is that there was some ongoing disharmony in the band, not musically on stage, but just in their long relationship. And I think they had just reached a point where they needed some new blood and some new perspective to come into it, and that's quite understandable for a band that at that point it had been around over 20 years. Actually over 25 years at that point. So I think I came in with a fresh attitude and with a commitment to take the band into the new millennium. It was coincidentally it was 1999, so they just figured, is classic rock going to be able to stick around for 3 or 4 more years? They actually had targeted 5.
Wow.
At that point, that we thought, man, if we can get to 2004, that would be great to keep this band alive.
Yeah.
And every subsequent year, we saw that classic rock was becoming more and more ingrained in not just in the culture that grew up with it, with the people that grew up with it, but in younger and younger people, to the point now, here we are, in the band, as you say, like I'm in my 19th year now. We now, on any given night, we played last night in where were we, in New Hampshire. Half the audience is under 30 years of age.
Wow.
We're amazed at just how younger people have discovered this, and I would attribute a lot of that to the internet and to classic rock radio, obviously. But they have discovered that there's something about those bands from that era that they want to that they feel connected to, and they're able to come and see. Well, there's about a dozen bands of that era that still tour on the level that we do, and when they see a rock show, when they see a great rock show, they become as they're just as enamored with it as people that grew up with it. So that's been the wonderful surprise in this whole journey.
Yeah. Now, I know you were obviously a very seasoned performer coming into Styx, but I mean, what are some of the things maybe that you've gleaned from working with guys like Tommy and Chuck and JY?
Well, the first thing I had to learn after coming from a solo career, the first thing you have to learn is how to play with others. I mean that, you've been. I'd had a career where I was pretty much the dictator who decided who was going to be coming into the band on every tour and decided who the producer would be or that sort of thing. And really, my only true insight into that democratic system was when I'd go and make albums. I'd usually bring in a producer that had some very distinct ideas that sometimes were very challenging to me, and I had to navigate my way through. And also in the 90s, I had begun kind of co-writing, so I began to open up to more collaborative efforts. But being in a band with 4 other guys at 5 when Chuck is able to make it out, that was a different paradigm that I had to. It took me a few years to kind of understand that you really are trying to get 5 people to speak with one voice.
Yeah.
And in all aspects of it. And once that began to sink in, my second life, I suppose, as being a member of Styx, began to really congeal into something that was really that I really value and that really fits with the with what we're doing.
For sure. Well, I mean, now here we are in 2017 with a brand new record of original material from the band.
Yeah,
I'm of course referring to The Mission, which
the
was
mission.
released back
Yeah.
in June 16th. Now, I think there's two really fascinating things about this record, Lawrence. I think, first of all, this is a concept record about a mission to Mars, which is that's pretty cool. Second of all, you guys were almost all analog on this, which gives it a real retro sound and feel, like almost like as it's been said in a few other interviews, like it has that 1979 Styx feel about it.
Well, that was absolutely intentional. It was we were hoping for that, but you never know until you actually try to go down that path. So what we were just talking about with classic rock and how that sound has it's weathered many years at this point. Pretty much we're getting into half a century where that sound is really well known and loved by a number of people. We thought, since that's what the audience is responding so well to, and since we've lived a good number of years now in the digital age, and we've been able to observe all the great advantages and some of the detractions that's brought about in our lives, why don't we make this album as if it's 1979 and none of this new technology exists? And sure enough, that was kind of the key that opened the door to suddenly hearing sounds and hearing the songs come together as if they were from that era and sounding authentic to the classic rock era. A lot of it was, and plus it made us kind of giddy in a weird way. Maybe it was the fumes or something, but it was like smelling the oxide coming off the tape machines, the big Studer tape machines, and having all these clunky old compressors and EQs and all kinds of gadgets that you really value the guys that are able to maintain that stuff and keep it in working order.
Yeah.
But just that the unclinical or the non antiseptic kind of things that the digital world has. The digital world's brought us there's a coldness to how you engage with making music. It's very efficient and it's very clean, but that's not necessarily all that conducive to having five guys in a studio with wires all over the place. And we basically shut our cell phones off and decided, let's pretend it's 1979.
Yeah.
And every time we walked back into the control room to hear something back, it was like we had big grins on our faces going, this sounds like we've stepped back in time. So I love to say about The Mission that it's an album made in the present day, recorded as if it was in the past, about a story that's in the future. So it really covers all time zones are covered.
Well, what I love about this story is there's characters, and from what I understand, Tommy sings most of the pilot songs, and JY is kind of the engineer, and then you quote unquote play the part of the first officer. Now, what I'm thinking about is, in terms of these roles that you've sort of ended up falling into on this record is this, it almost seems like it's almost metaphorical for the current state of relationships within the band. Is that just an odd coincidence that ended up happening?
No, I agree with that assessment. It, what's so daunting about concept albums, and not for me, I'm a huge fan of them, but what a lot of people find, it doesn't rub them the right way, is that they can get too deep into the actual conceptual nature of it and miss a lot of the just the fun and the emotional impact of good music. In this case, rock music. What I think is the strength in The Mission is that although the overall view is a mission to Mars, yes, and then eventually on to Pluto, that's not really where the heart of the story is. The heart of the story is amongst the crew, as you pointed out, the characters that each one represents in the lead vocal aspect, and the human drama that they have to navigate is of far more. There's way more entertainment in that than simply being in a being locked in a capsule and going on this perilous adventure.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of parallels between that and for me, I relate it to a life in the band.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what you just asked me before, what did I learn from working with these guys once I joined Styx? It really is that. It's how you navigate your way through any disagreements you have, or any great moments of euphoria, or it's quite an ego trip we're all on too, when you end every day with a few thousand people on their feet, big smiles on their faces looking at you. It's you can't help but get a great boost of confidence and ego and all those things that become very dangerous in real life.
Of course. Yeah.
They work so well on stage, but they can cause all kinds of havoc
Uh-huh.
if you let them enter into your your day-to-day existence to too great a degree. So that is really where the entertainment is in this. And Tommy, he said this in interviews, and it's just how he perceives it. He perceives our relationship as if I've got a big brother attitude to him, not in the George Orwell sense, but in the sense of an older mentor, even though he's actually older than I am. I want to stipulate that for the record. He is older than me. But that naturally falls, and I'm quoting him here, it naturally falls because I guess probably because I had a long solo career beforehand. So, I'm able to kind of, try to keep a clear head when things get overamped, so to speak. And so I think that's kind of the voice where I speak. JY actually in real life, we'll go with that now, he actually does have a degree in rocket science, which is kind of amazing. We have a guy in the band who does have that. And so he represents kind of a more engineering aspect of the record, which is there are basic physical nuts and bolts that have to be in place before anything can unfold. And that again, I relate to the life of a band where, when you start off in a band, you got to figure out a way of gathering enough gear, first of all, to do it. Then you got to get some mobility to actually get yourself from one place to another. So these are all things that you learn along the way.
Of course.
And that is, to my mind, very akin to, in a small way, akin to the great endeavors of a NASA type mission.
For sure. Well, now I know we're just about getting wrapped up here, so I did want to mention that you're just sort of in the process of wrapping up the United We Rock tour with REO Speedwagon and Don Felder, and now you're going to be moving into the more, I guess for lack of a better word, typical Styx run where you're doing sort of 2 hours worth of material, and there's a series of shows coming up here in Quebec in particular, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention August 24th in Trois-Rivières, and a very interesting gig in Fairview, Pointe Claire on August 25th. You're working with a painter for a charitable cause. Yeah.
Throughout the year, there are a few charity shows that we're connected to larger, societies or charitable organizations is what I mean to say. And that's one that we're doing in Pointe Claire. So we're really thrilled with that. Prior to that, actually, the show we're doing in New Jersey is for a group who have, it's going to be the first show ever where this new type of hearing aid, it's beyond even a hearing aid. It actually gives, it's that new, I'm going to say the word wrong, so I'll avoid saying it. It's the new ear that can hook up to the hearing impaired that actually connects to the oral nerve and gives them hearing for the first time.
Oh, very
cool. That's quite an emotional thing. Oh, it's astounding. So at that concert, we've got that. And we love being connected to these various organizations and doing things that particularly work on a local level, because we come back to all these cities and communities, et cetera, for years and years. They've supported us. It's good that there's something there, and that's why we started Rock to the Rescue, which is our own kind of charitable thing that does these things when we're touring on our own. So, we're looking forward to that, and I think it's a great cause, and thank people for coming out, and they're going to get a rock show on top of it all.
Right on. Well, as I mentioned, Styx's brand new album, The Mission, came out June 16th. And then if you are interested in seeing some live dates, With the band, I see there's quite a few dates listed on the Facebook page, so things look like they're pretty current. Lawrence, thanks very much for being on Do You Know Jack radio show today, man. I really appreciate the time.
My absolute pleasure talking to you, Jack. And yeah, we look forward to these shows coming up in Quebec. I have them right in front of me. I can read them off if you want. Trois Rivières on August 24,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
Point Claire, which is August 25, Saint Georges de Beauce on the 26th, and Chicoutimi on the 27th. So I am so looking forward to getting back to all those places because I love playing my solo days, and whenever Styx have come to Canada, it's a great moment.
Awesome.